que hacía aquí en España. Entonces alguna vez estaba ahí. Claro, reportero.
Muchas gracias.
¿Y a Caro? A ver.
Ongi etorri zinemaldira, sail ofizialeko futbolin filma ikusi dugu, eta prest gaude prentsaurrekoari hasiera emateko. Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon and welcome to this edition of the San Sebastian International Film Festival. We have the film that we've just seen called Futbolín in the official section. And to tell us things about that film, we've got the director Juan José Campanella, one of the actors Arturo Valls, and the producers Jorge Estrada, Manuel Polanco, Mercedes Gamero, and Gaston Gorali. And what you're urging they're longing to answer your questions. So therefore, first question, please. We'll give a prize to the first question, and there it is, please.
Variety. My question for the people, and I believe many people here who have enjoyed your film, is if one day they will... Sorry, I've got to stand up.
Yeah. Thank you.
If one day they will be able to see more. In other words, last year at the Annecy Film Festival, Gaston, Juan José, you spoke about the possibility of a sequel written by, which Eduardo Sacheri was, I believe, writing. Is that going anywhere? Could there be a Futbol 2? Or is it just too early, really, to say?
Hemos perdido las Olimpiadas.
We've lost the Olympics. No, that wasn't the question. Well, I think it's a bit early to say anything because we continue to work with that idea in mind and with other ideas as well. There are cases of second parts which are better than the first parts, but that's when a second part has been matured or is ripe enough, and when it has achieved its objective in being a film in itself. Another stage in the characters. There are characters in this film that I would like to revisit, like the ace football player, who's a character who I liked very much. But I would try to avoid a second part of film because the first one worked very well. Well, first of all, because we don't know how the first one's going to work throughout the world. It's only been premiered in Argentina and it went quite well. But it would have to be, well, we should not be dragged along and do it too quickly. We'd have to do it at the right time in the case we do a second part or a second film. To answer you specifically, we're thinking about it, but it's not urgent. I must say that, albeit it's only been premiered in Argentina, the few people that have seen it in important markets have received the film quite well. And the best demonstration of this is that it's been sold to very exotic countries for us, like, for example, Korea, and offers from Thailand, places which are quite atypical, the Middle East, Turkey, Poland, Russia. So therefore, I'm quite optimistic as regards to what you've created is almost local and super universal in general. And the first question is to talking about a second part or a second film. Well, this is great. This sounds very good. Yes, another question. Hi, Juan José. Good morning. Hi, how are you? I recognize you because of your accent. I would like to ask you, I imagine with this film you wanted to transmit the passion of football and put it on the screen in cinema scope. So, and I would like to ask you whether you inspired yourself upon any ace football player and specifically, or are we thinking evilly when we think that this character... No, the secret of creation is quite ethereal. Well, it wasn't to transmit the passion of football. I'm not a football fan, as I've said quite often. Football is, nevertheless, is a big container and manifests quite in black and white and right in your face other types of passions, the passions of life, the passion for to exceeding oneself and to the passion for. And here more specifically we have a story which is Amadeo, which is the only protagonist of the film, or the main character, who encounters a challenge that he didn't expect, neither was he seeking, and he's got to go, it's either he grows to confront the challenge or he disappears at the end of the day. Football is like the container of all of this. I don't think it's a football film, and I took care for it not to be a film that dealt with the issue of football. It doesn't refer to real football, apart from the badly thinking people such as yourself may think it has. Nevertheless, I think it's like as much football as Casablanca deals with an issue of war, for example. Campanella, 3 short questions, quite briefly. First of all, how can you give depth, so much depth as you wanted to do in this film, to animated cartoons, which was also a fun thing for kids or for children? At the end, you say that football will bring about a miracle, and the miracles that we've seen in football is corruption, and that's a second question. And the third question, I'm going to defend, first of all, the work of Arturo Valls, whose dubbing was extraordinary. But why did you dub it? Because Spanish is spoken in Argentina. Well, you tell him. Excuse me, but I've got to say it, okay, Arturo? Well, let's do it bit by bit, because the truth, there were 3 questions in one. Each of the questions deserves quite a long answer, a lengthy answer. The first one I've forgotten, but please repeat it if you don't mind. The depth. To achieve depth, you Argentinians always find depth in everything, in cartoons, in animated films. I think one of the things that the film contributes, and Sergio Paulo I spoke to, which was one of the animation directors of the film. He's a very well-known Spanish animator, a person who has worked in Dina, of my favorite Villain, that was a film. It was to achieve good realism in the faces of the characters, which is not very usual. Normally when you talk about performance in animation films, what you use as a reference, another film, animated film, and we used other sources. We sought filming each other, performing. We used real cinema sources, and this is for the cinephiles in the audience. Everyone has realized the references to 2001 or Apocalypse Now, but very little to Othello of Orson Welles or Frank Capra's films, or even to certain looks that Ingrid Bergman has in Casablanca. It was interesting for us, we who love those films, to decode what muscles people's use in their faces, because that's what animation is like. It's like being a puppeteer. And the idea is to achieve realism. We try to give realism to the performances. And the first 6 months of the animation process, we focused upon achieving this. And that's what provides, or gives the characters something. There are moments in where you forget that you're looking at an animation film. There are moments. I think that, and this has to do with what I've just said. Nevertheless, that depth that you're talking about, we should not forget, it's a film which incorporates children as well in the audience. So therefore we can't be too complex, or those black and white aspects that I carried out in The Secret in Their Eyes. And that's why we had to bear in mind that responsibility when filming. The second question was that of the fact that you say that football, there'll be miracles. It's a question, and anything can happen in football. You know what, football, anything can happen in football, as you know. Once again, there are no references to real football apart from the manager, the character, and the ace player. The manager is the character for the adults in the film who says something quite cynical at the end of the film. We had great philosophical debates, I would even say, and this is true, I'm being serious here, upon whether it should finish, the manager should finish that way or not. Once again, if it had been a film only for adults, we would have had no doubts at all. The fact that we include children to see our film this generates a certain responsibility when you're making a film and what's being said on the screen. And at the end of the day, what we decided was to take that path. We were just alluding to that. We didn't want to go further in depth because it would have turned into a film about football, and it's not a film about football. The fact that we used his voice for dubbing, I wanted to clear up, it's not a dubbing into Spanish, into Castilian Spanish, so to speak. It's a co-production between Spain and Argentina, and both versions were conceived as being original versions. The script in Spain, Fernando Castés worked quite a lot, who was the co-author of the Daughter of the Bride and other films. I was quite present in that process as well. And the truth is, we were talking about, and at the beginning, by the way, there was a casting carried out in both countries, and the idea was to record both voices, both versions, to choose the version which better transmitted the character to animate the film, but that would have brought about a logistic nightmare, the truth be said. So therefore, that was the order, but the script was pre-existent, and the fact is, existed beforehand. That's what I mean. That is to say, acting and performing in animation is not the same as a live feature film. A live feature film, you have an actor per character. That actor is the character, and he gives everything to convey the character. Here, the actor gives his voice, his part of the character, and for 50 animators that do absolutely all the rest. A great part of the performance is exactly the same in all of the different versions. So therefore, what we were seeking was to transmit to the audience things the most direct way possible, and I hope those people who come to the gala can bring their kids and their children, because I don't want to have 1,200 adults watching the film, expecting a film like by Ozon, for example, in the inaugural gala this evening. And that would be very difficult. The work with not the character, his character who speaks very well, but some of the characters of the players, Calis, for example. If you look at El Cordobés in the original, you would understand the Cordobés Argentinian language. You wouldn't be able to understand him. And the film doesn't talk about the history of Argentina and so on. But it talks about Luna Villanegra, things that are quite intrinsically, or The Secret of Their Eyes talks about the political, intrinsically things about Argentina. The decision was to the two original versions, and here what we wanted to show the Spanish version here, so that it could have a greater impact, and so that everyone could understand it. The important thing is that you liked it, as you've said, and he, because he's the best voice for that character.
Sí,
He's been raising his hand from the beginning. Yes, he'll go there right away. He'll be the next one. I'm in favor of your cause, okay? Yes, bald people should come together and defend each other. Hugo Sanchez from Argentina. Hi, how are you? I would like to ask you whether it was a surprise to be called to inaugurate the film festival. It's an Argentinian film, as you know, and it has to do, and it's an animated film, and it's not quite normal or usual, shall we say, that an animated film can inaugurate a film festival. Yes, once again, it's a co-production between Spain and Argentina, so therefore it's a film, a national film in both countries or both sides of the Atlantic. So therefore, that did surprise us. It surprised us, and we were very grateful, and it was quite a pleasure to be able. It was something very important for the festival to do. It gives a lot of confidence to have a lot of trust in the film, but it's a good backing, shall we say, for the animation industry in Argentina as well as in Spain. We believe that we are in condition to compete. We are in the condition to compete at a world scale, and there exists a certain prejudice. This is There's no doubt about it. We know that these types of films or this technological level, the content matter is different all over the place, all over the world. But this level can only be achieved in Hollywood. It's good to be backed and to show that such is not the case, that in our countries we can also make films, animated films, that we have the human talent, we have the machines to be able to do these films. And it's a good backing, shall we say, from the festival. And undoubtedly, the organizers of the festival are not going to show something that they don't like. So therefore, it's also, obviously, it's quite praiseworthy on their behalf. Yes, hi, how are you? How are you? How do you feel? Quite good. That's good. First of all, I want to congratulate the captain of the skipper, of the defenders, the forwards. It's a marvelous team. The game was very pleasant. It was fun, and albeit you've used a lot of irony upon the megastar football stars. Albeit you said, and you know that who we're thinking about. There are a lot of the characters of this nature. A technical. Why in 3D? Well, good question. Well, and it's a bit of a difficult question for me to answer. No, the truth is, it was a discovery of mine, that of 3D. I must say it quite clearly, shall we say. When you set up make a film of this at this level nowadays, it's got to be in 3D, I believe, and that's the origin of it. When I started to investigate upon the subject matter, I liked the idea. I had hardly ever seen any 3D films beforehand, but I started to like the subject or the issue. I saw that I don't like when 3D is when people spit on you, and it's as if when it's used as an effect when it comes out of the screen, when things leave the screen, so to speak. But films, important films such as Avatar, for example, films that use it as it's almost normal. The story is told in the same manner. I liked it very much, and that is, I'm under the impression that 3D, undoubtedly, it's not a revolution in cinema such as sound has been, because sound changed the way we made films. It changed everything. It changed the actors and the script writers, and it was a true revolution. But it is going to be something like color, I would say. Obviously, it increases your budget as well, doesn't it? Well, the budget is not increased that much, the truth. It's increased, but the gross amount is the same, similar to the 2D of the film. We're in the stage as a color at the beginning, which was reserved for the very big, large feature films like the Wizard of Oz and films of this nature. I think that 3D follows that the same path. I like, and on the contrary to what seems obvious, the scenes, large mass sort of landscapes in 3D, I see them in 2D. I don't notice the difference. But in the small scenes, the intimate scenes, it seems as if you were watching theatre right on the stage. And it seems that you're much closer, and that's what interests me the most. And I'm under the impression that it's going to be quite normal, and there's going to be any difference in price, and it's going to be just like color. It's going to be a normal film, and one's going to choose it, make it in 2D or to make it in black and white for some reason or other, or for some expressive sort of reason. I think that's the path it's taking. Things have to be improved. You're going to see something which is very good in El Cursal. We did a test run yesterday to resolve the problem of the lighting. Some of us complain about 3D. There's two projectors, and it worked. As you're going to see today, we carried out a test run yesterday with Miguel Gilaberte, the genius of color in Spain, one of the great artists in color in Spain, with two projectors simultaneously in order to give more light, and you're going to see it very, very well if you watch it. Hi, I would like to know, I like the film very much, and I'd like to know whether you see as something negative that your film inaugurates this film festival after the injustice brought about by The Secret in Their Eyes. Of course, no, I'm only joking. The truth is, well, we got our own back, didn't we, at the end of the day? No, not at all. No. It's all okay. Everything's, we're all friends. Thank you very much for that implicit praise in your question. Gabriel Fresta from Radio Ibadaria and Radio de Plata. The issue is what we saw in Argentina and here in Spain. The difference is the adaptation more than dubbing, I believe. I would like to know whether you trust professionals or in each and every one of the different adaptations of the work that is carried out, for example, and Fontova, for example, the character remained the same. Well, as I was saying, I had worked in the Argentinian version, shall we say, the more down-to-earth and the English version. The rest of the versions are beyond my control, and they go beyond my level of language skills. And what was the question? Apart from Fontova, the character. No, it's quite faithful. No, the idea here is Fernando, who's a person who worked a lot with me and who thinks practically the same as I do. He worked a lot in Spain. He has written scripts in Spain. He knows a lot about dialogues, and we worked a lot with Gustavo Ferrada. And the truth is, the idea is to maintain the same spirit in the film of the Argentinian film. The film, as you see, it used local jargon in the way it talked, but it didn't refer, in any case, to the history of Argentina. Therefore, there weren't adaptations to the Spanish history either. It was how to rescue, shall we say, that humor and that ironic sense of humor, shall we say. There were things that didn't work at all at times that we wanted to, as a joke, we wanted something that people laugh at in Argentina, said here in Spain people don't laugh at, but it was very faithful, shall we say, to maintain those ironic moments, moments of humor, those moments of tenderness, those intimate moments and so on. This is something that we try to maintain, at least in the three versions. We want it to be the same film at the end of the day, as if it were with subtitles, but much more comprehensive, basically. And Fontova, the character, well, when we started to... Fontova is the character of the El Loco. He's the football player as he survives in the version, in the Argentinian version. Quite fortunately, it's a moment in football where there are players from all over the place, especially in Spain. It wouldn't be strange, and plus the football team is an international football team. It is made up by the best of every different country. And it was a character, he was a character that was so particular in the performance that he portrays, and practically impossible to translate, that we decided to leave it that way, with that version. He's the only guy that got paid twice as much. No, they get paid for just using their voice. I don't know how that was managed at all. There was a session to say, well, I can't go back to the meta goal. I can't go back to the foosball table. That's all. Hi, over here. I have a couple of questions. I want to go back to you being let down because, well, you haven't answered whether it was a deception for you or a letdown that the reception of the film was so good to not be included in winning a prize here in the film festival in San Sebastian. And an animation process depends a lot upon something that's technical. Does this mean that you have less authorship and control on the film than when you work with real actors? Well, I think all of the questions for me, if anyone wants to intervene, please go ahead. Well, let down, well, of course, well, since I was a kid, I don't like to play for playing's sake. I say, let's make it interesting. Or if you're in a game, especially when you're put into the game, you want to win something at the end of the day. So, and the same with how the film was received. We expected something, but that's part of the rules of the game, to lose. So therefore, I try to... Something strange happens to me with prizes, and I've suppressed, or I've tried to leave to one side the sadness of not winning a prize, that I've also let to one side the happiness of winning a prize. So therefore, more or less, it lasts very little, that is to say, the joy as well as the sadness. In any case, the important thing is what happens to the audience who watches it. And I recognize that my films, I'm more in I put myself in the shoes of the audience more than the specialist when I make a film. And it's more destined and more aimed at the audience at the end of the day. That's as regards to the prize. I hope I've answered your question. Okay. So, and the other question, control of directing the film. It's a good question because there's a paradox here, and that is to say, in vivo, shall we say, or live cinema, because of the studio and my experience in making films, albeit I can do everything, but even if I do bad, if the DOP or the sound director gets sick, end of the day, a kid light or whatever it is, or placing a character or whatever, say, and I can move the boom or whatever, I can get out of the way and resolve the question. I know what to ask, and I know what you can't do in many of the different professions. Here in the field of animation, no, such is not the case. There are things such as shading, rigging, debugging, solving, all of this jargon, all finishes in ing, rendering, that I can swear what you see is a computer full of numbers on the screen, and I don't understand a thing, but in turn at the same time. And in that sense, I depend a lot more upon the opinion of the artists, animation artists. They're not only technicians, these are artists who have technical knowledge as well, or know-how. But at the same time, what happens, the paradox arises, and that is, I've got to follow up everything that I don't have to decide upon everything, like the color of the eyes of the actors, the shape of the face, of their faces, or the way in which they move, or the way in which they talk, the combination of body and voice. That is to say, the amount of decisions that a director has to make in an animation film is light years beyond what one has to do in a real live film. So therefore, I feel that I've had to make more decisions, and I've had a lot more involvement in this film and control in this film. To say quite clearly, Darin's face comes along with himself. With his face is his face, but here we've had to talk about for hours on end, 6 or 7 hours, to decide, and after several days, after 6 or 7 hours, to decide the color of the eyes of the skipper of the football team, and we were deciding whether it was greenish blue or bluish green. So therefore, it's something that drives you crazy, the texture of the clothing they wear, the football kid, whether whether it looks realistic, the amount of freckles on their face, whether you get too close to the close up, the texture has to change so that you can see further detail. It's overwhelming, the truth be said. And I'm not going to tell you here, but there was a moment in which I was obsessed by the amount of details that we were missing, that were going through the different filters and to calm me down, we analyzed, they showed me a film by Pixar to show us frame by frame the amount of mistakes that they miss as well in Pixar. Well, and quite obviously the audience doesn't realize this, but when you're making the film, it's truly overwhelming, the amount of details one has to go through. So therefore, on the other hand, I believe that it's quite deserved, the result of the film at the end of the day. Hi, good afternoon. It seemed a very interesting film to me, especially after your trajectory in Spain, or at least in Argentina, cartoons have and animated films such as today in Argentina. But it's quite modeled, different to other recent films that I've seen, quite modulated with characters which are very, like Laura, for example, from the beginning is quite, Michelle Jarre, for example, I'm going to mention, collaborates with her voice, talking about dubbing that we've talked about. The only thing that, yes, I know, the only thing I find in the film, I like the film, but I think it's a level above others, but those references that you've talked about, Citizen Kane or 2001, or Uma la Douce, for example, these are beautiful, but don't you think that it's a bit easy to resolve, for example, and a bit over the top when selecting these memorable scenes? And I don't want to be evil in my question. No, I'm not taking it in that. I won't take it in that slant. You know that I had a lot of fun, and this is something that I couldn't be able to do in a live feature film with live actors. For Irma la Douce, try to explain that to me, that film, because that was just a coincidence. I don't know which in Irma la Douce. That's what I recognized. And that is, there's a music similar to that in the film, and the bar appears. Okay, yes, a little French, yes, a little French background. I liked it very much. Well, look, no, that wasn't intentional. But you're right. And I saw Irma la Douce once again just a short while back. For me, it's a game. I enjoyed the beginning. I enjoyed the beginning of the film. I think there are 2 or 3 that are quite obvious. Obviously, you're a person who knows a lot about classic films, which is what I like as well. And for many people, that's not that obvious. For example, I think that Citizen Kane, it's not that obvious. And plus, these are things for kids, for children. The idea that I enjoyed was that the children could see it, or kids could see it here, and at a certain moment in their lives they could see 2001 or Citizen Kane or Casablanca, for example. Where's Casablanca after this? If you're going to answer me, Casablanca, that's the moment when I was cleaning my glasses. Or so you caught me. Mr. Disc Goes to Town. I don't know what the name of the film. It's called The Secreto de la Vida, a film by Frank Capra. And that discovery of seeing, if you see 2001, Space Odyssey, well, look, they took that scene from that film. You know that what I like very much, and one creates fantasies, that one's film is not going to finish in 1 year or 2 years' time, they can be seen in 10 or 20 or 30 years' time. And well, I'm very interested because the great films that I've seen are like that. That is, that once I see them every 10 years, something has happened in my life, and I read them in a different way after that time. And I insist that this film was destined to children, and that was present in our mind in every moment, and that's got to be present in the analysis. If you want to carry out analysis beyond just watching the film and enjoying it, children who have never seen any of those great films that you've mentioned, and it's true that they are in the references, but I enjoyed the fact that someone sees a film later on when one's an adult, you go, hey, look, I know where this scene came from, or that reference, now I understand it better, and I enjoy it in a different way, and so on and so forth.
Hola.
Hi. In cinema, there's a Spanish film over here. It's going to be premiered, an animation film, Justin and the Spade of Braveness. And Princesa Merida, they could have made the whole film with what the budget they used in another film. That's quite possible. I would like to know what your proportion, the producers perhaps can talk here, what's the proportion of the budget between, the difference in the budget that you've had more or less between Meteorol and a Pixar or a DreamWorks film. We did it with the catering budget, basically, more or less, of those films. A figure, a film, an important film, of which Juan has made in the past, an average of $2 million, is the 10th part of the cost of this film. And at the same time, this film is the 5th or the 10th budget of an important animated film, and it's a film which would cost about 20 or $21 million. That's a budget. A DreamWorks film, maybe 180 million, and Pixar, 200 million. There you go, more or less, ballpark figures. So that's why yes, obviously it's very hard to do this. That's what I was saying when you were referring to that scene. I think that more often the difference in the budget can't be seen, or the difference doesn't exist when you see it on the screen. The fact we premiered the film in Argentina in the most competitive years of the animation market in history. We had Pixar with a sequel, DreamWorks with a film, a very powerful film, and Illumination Studios as well with My Villain 2. And competing against all of those films, if you add up one budget and another, you see the difference. We, in the premiere and all the weeks that were at the box office, for example, we beat all of those films at the same time. So therefore, I believe that more and more we're going to see films outside the Hollywood system that compete on the same level, because we have artistic and creative freedom working with Juan and with the producers that in Hollywood lacks, and that's an advantage you can use in our favor. Better stories, much freer stories for any type of market analysis tests. Hi. I would like to ask you about the origin of this project, because it's an adaptation. It's an adaptation of Alberto Fontana Rosa, who outside of Argentina is not an author who's very well known, but in Argentina he's well known. He's like an institution there, basically. I don't know. Could you tell us how the process was brought about to adapt the story to the screenplay, and the repercussion that Fontana Rosa has in Argentina, whether the audience has felt that they were recognized in the universe of the books he's written? Yes, I believe so. The story, Memories of a Right Wing, really has no plot. It's a story, it's a very short story, it's only 3 pages long. It's a monologue of a football player. At no time did it tell you it's a football player, a foosball or a table football player. But the data that he provides and the details, you can show that it shows that he's a player of a table football. He talks about Pelé, 100 goals on a weekend, on a Saturday. That's what I score in an afternoon. Things of that nature. I'm always next to the goal. Don't use the midfield player. I like to be right next to the goal, much closer to the goal to score the goals. The story is a lot of fun, but it doesn't have a story or a plot. But that was a marvelous starting point. But the story and the other characters have all been created. Fontana Rosa, as you say in Argentina, he has a very big universe because he's a graphic humorist, and he tells stories. He has a humor which is easily recognized, a humor in dialogues which is quite recognized, not so much of telling jokes, but more of the musicality, shall we say, in the dialogues. And I think this has been maintained. And in fact, we are in close contact with his son, who now has the rights of Fontana Rosa, died in 2007. And he was very happy and very proud of the film, too, by the way. One final question, please. Yes. Julian Montesolo from Argentina. The question more than anything else is for the producers, because on the one hand, you talk about and leave quite open the possibility of there being a sequel or continuity in Metegol and also in the animation process. And you're talking about expanding this model that you've just generated with Metegol. And the other, Campanella says that he wants to take a break now, it seems. This leaves a lot. I always want to take a break. But you're very tired. We know that you're very tired. And the other thing is to talk about the versions once again of the film. Could you refer Strada Mora, for example, the work for the Russian and Korean versions? How are you working upon this? Because obviously it's completely unknown. Korea has just been sold. I don't know whether the Koreans like it because Korean and Chinese, but nevertheless, there was a strong competition in Toronto. Toronto is the first film festival where the film is seen completely. Those that had wanted to buy it beforehand, they'd seen only short excerpts of it. So in Italy and in Korea, there was a very strong, the Koreans were going to dub it, the Italians undoubtedly, and Juan were going to dub it, and they want Juan to intervene as much as wherever he can. The Russians, who were the first country to buy it, it's quite curious. With the cost of this film, we had to ask for very high prices for our traditional type film, and the buyer said, well, I like it very much, but to pay what you're asking for, we've got to see the whole film. And the fact, we told them no problem, and that's happening right now, that transaction process. The Russians have already made a trailer which is already on YouTube, and it's quite funny. I'm sure you can see it in Russian on YouTube. It sounds fun, doesn't it? It sounds like this. And then in Universal, it took Latin America and Spain. The dubbing has been made, which is also quite well done, for neutral Spanish or Castilian, for example, for Colombia or Mexico and the rest of Latin America. It's going to be used in neutral Spanish with important people from Mexican cinema and so on in the country. In Brazil, it's been translated into Portuguese. And I've seen parts of the film in Portuguese, and it sounds quite well as well. Perhaps, Juan, you saw that part in Portuguese. Oh, it's perfect. And in English, we're dubbing it in England, and we believe it's Rupert Grant is one of the Anthony Head. I don't remember many of the names. There are 2 scripts have been made. It's not changing the script. The script is what Castells did here, and backed up by Juan. We want a story to remain, and what the English distributor can interpret can be useful for the English market. And in the US, for example, we're talking to the large distributors and talking about launching it on a grand scale with a lot of copies. We're talking about an American version and to have time to be able to dub it. But what turns a pleasant surprise for me is that the film is not going to age. There's no problem. It spends 2014 in the US. In the US, they don't care what happens in the rest of the world. We're a bit more concerned about what happens there. But they're going to think it's a film made by Americans, original from the US. It has Tom Hanks or whoever dubbing the characters. So it's a film that we expect and hope that it can be local in every country. It's shown quite clearly we can't supervise, like Juan said before, Poland or Turkey, who has bought and has paid an important figure. The Middle East, I believe that these are films that normally the independent distributors don't have access to Pixar or DreamWorks because they're all channeled through the big studios. But here they've seen a product which has a very high technological level with a story that they've liked, and that an independent distributor can launch or show in their own country. And American film market is where it starts in November. We're very optimistic, and we hope, obviously, that Juan, apart from him being a director and partner, creator Gaston, who brought Fontana Rosa to us and talked to Juan, that we can continue to be involved making international quality cinema from Buenos Aires. And that involves or means making a product which is completely different from things that come from other countries or other stories that come from other places or other countries. And I hope that Meterol and Futbolín, Fuseball, can turn into the franchise that has happened and turned into things that are now made in Hollywood. Where at the beginning we're very humble from the fact we know that it's a long way, it's a long road that we've got to go down, but we've taken the first initial steps, important steps, and you are the first witnesses, shall we say. It's not been seen abroad, this film. So this evening is going to be the first time it's seen by the general audience. I would like to stipulate the following, clear up that from the first moment the film was designed in that way. What we wanted, like Jorge says, for it to be local in any of the different markets. And in certain moments we thought that the technology could enable us to change the colors of the shirts of the football players. Then later on we thought that it was a much more difficult, a bit more complicated. But that controversy of the Argentinian film translated into Spanish, well, from the outset, and as you can see here, this film was a Spanish-Argentinian co-production, and there's a lot of Spanish money invested into it, and we always thought from the beginning that the film is not that it was going to be translated at all. We thought that we were going to, with change of pace and changes in jargon, linguistically, they could work both in both markets and even into the English market. So therefore, that's why it was premiered in Argentina. It's quite obvious, having a director with a category of Juan José Campanella and the script stemming from an idea of an Argentinian story. What you must understand that it's a true co-production and that it's Argentinian as much as it is Spanish. That is, it's not that all of a sudden we think that to make it much more international we had to change it and translate it. No, that from the outset, that's how we addressed the making of the film. Thank you very much to everyone.